Hi, I'm Glenn Gable, and welcome to another From Pen to Page story review. Today we're going to be covering Last of the Breed by Louis L'Amour, so stick around. So Last of the Breed is a survival story. It's about an Air Force captain named Joe Mack who's shot down during the Cold War in the Soviet Union and is put into a camp in Siberia, and he's got to escape and cross Siberia during the winter, braving nature and KGB agents to try and get to freedom. So that's kind of the story of it. And it was really fun to read. I really enjoyed it. For any of you who have not read Louis L'Amour, you really should check him out. He's known for Westerns, but this one doesn't really fall into that category. It's a little bit of a departure from his normal thing. Stuff I really like about Last of the Breed. Louis L'Amour is well known for his descriptions of location and land. It absolutely felt like he had been to Siberia. And as he talks about Joe Mack crossing the mountains and escaping from like wild bears and setting up all these traps to catch the KGB manhunters that are after him, it felt like, I don't know, like L'Amour, he knew what he was talking about. Maybe he wasn't really fighting off bears in Siberia, but it felt like that. The dialogue was also short, tense, and very authentic. It felt good. So I really enjoyed those elements of it. I enjoyed the buildup between Joe Mack and the Soviet KGB machine that's going after him. There's a colonel that's kind of his nemesis that has kind of directed this Siberian manhunter to go after Joe. And so you've got this really interesting villain that's coming after Joe and just as capable and deadly as the protagonist is. And so they sort of build into this big battle, and the two guys are going to eventually meet somewhere in some wild part of nature, and they're going to face off, and you can feel that building, and L'Amour does it really well. He's great with description. He does pretty well with tension, and so I did enjoy that. Okay, so as always, what didn't I like about it? So spoiler alert, obviously, I mean, it's L'Amour follows formula. Joe Mack does indeed escape after meeting up with this KGB manhunter. The downside of it is that this battle that they've been leading up to is never actually shown. We see the manhunter KGB agent finally catch up to Joe Mack in the last couple of chapters. And I was so excited to like read how this was going to play out. And then L'Amour skips it entirely. And we find out in the next chapter, which is the final one, that Joe Mack sends a threatening letter to the KGB colonel, basically telling him, "I've killed your guy," and he escapes. So it was so anticlimactic. And I think this is a problem that a lot of authors run into is they have a great premise. They're really good at building tension and even with pacing. But then when it comes to paying everything off at the very end, they kind of dropped the ball. They just don't show it. And something that you'll hear again and again from authors, readers, and writers, and everyone in between is you show, you don't tell. And I think that L'Amour sort of broke that rule a little bit. We just sort of heard about this final conflict. We didn't get to see it. I wanted to see it. The other issue I had with the book was that Joe Mack, the protagonist, comes across a lot of characters. Some of them are on his side. Some of them are working against him. So you've got several KGB agents, and you've got several local Siberian townspeople that kind of become his friends. A lot of Russian names to keep track of. And many of those names actually start with, there's like, I can't even remember, but there was like names that sounded very similar to each other. And so it was hard for me to track who was who a little bit because there were so many minor characters named, and because the names were so similar, it was just hard for me to remember who this person was and that person was. So I've said this before in other videos, I think when you have a lot of characters in your book, that's fine. You need to make them very distinct. And I learned when I was writing The Soothsayer, you also need to be very aware of the character names and not having too important characters that sound somewhat similar to the reader. Beyond that, and this is only a very minor gripe, is I noticed that there was kind of a love interest that Joe Mack has with a village woman that he comes across. And it was only very slightly developed. And I noticed this in Lamore's other work, is that his female characters are often kind of one-dimensional a little bit. There's not that they're poorly written, it's just there's not a lot to them. It's not a gripe. I wouldn't say it made the book worse or anything, but it was just something I've noted with his writing. But again, I'm sure people can say that about some of my work too. So what can I say? Overall, though, I enjoyed the book. It was good. And even though the ending was a little anticlimactic and there was a little bit of confusion on characters, I would give it 4 stars. I think it was a fun read. And I think if you're looking for kind of an action adventure story or a survival story, if you're a fan of Tom Clancy books or you're a fan of Louis L'Amour, definitely check it out. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. And if you're looking for a fantastic read, check out The Soothsayer. I'll see you next time.